recording. Um, so anyways, yes. So as I learn more, I'm always happy to share like behind the scenes discussions. They don't always include all of us faculty in it, but I know like the chair of the history department is really open with us about this is what's happening. Same with like I teach in the honors department as well, and they've been very open about telling us. And both those departments have said asked for faculty that wants to teach face to face to offer limited classes on campus. Christian, yeah, I know it's not the ideal situation. No. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and
I
start.
refuse. I will sit out a fucking year if I have to do that shit. I really will.
Let me make a few announcements here. So you didn't have anything to submit to me this weekend. And so I haven't graded these yet, but in the next 24 hours, I will have the last discussion board post graded. If you haven't submitted it, I will still take it, right? I will still accept late discussion board posts. So if you haven't, please go and do it and get that done. This week we are continuing to read the Ramayana, and you do have a discussion board post that is basically forcing you to pick your topic for the Ramayana paper, right? You're going to answer two questions, so this is going to be a really short. You can go in and do this now if you already have decided what you're going to write your paper on, but you're going to tell me which topic, which theme stands out to you the most, and then I'm going to ask you to pick out three short quotes. I'll edit this so that it's spelled correctly. You're going to pick three short quotes from or passages that relate to the theme you've chosen, right? And then you're going to do a little explanation of each quote. So this can be short, but what I'm hoping is that when you are done writing up this discussion board post, that you will have an outline for your paper, right? And then I've also linked on week 8 the prompt, the assignment for the Ramayana paper, so that you can be looking at it as you're reading, right? So it's a 2 to 3 page paper analyzing one of the themes in the Ramayana, right? So you don't need to uh, write about all the themes. In fact, please do not try to write about all the themes. Um, Choose one. You're either going to talk about religion, how religion is portrayed in the Ramayana, um, cultural aspects. So under cultural aspects is where you would put, well, cultural and social is where you would put things like gender. If you want to analyze the theme of gender in the Ramayana, that would be an excellent paper topic. Or you can talk about the politics that we see in the Ramayana, the political structure, how the politics function there. Another kind of cultural and social theme would be the environment, like how the environment, what roles does it play in the story, what that tells us about the importance of the environment. That would be another excellent theme. So this by Sunday, I want you to have picked a theme and to have picked out some evidence of the theme from the book itself. Right. So as you're reading it, really pay attention. Hopefully, a theme has already jumped out at you, and that would make it a little bit easier. If a theme has not jumped out at you yet as you're reading it, then really in the next couple of chapters this week, you want to pick a theme. Honestly, if nothing jumps out at you, you can always come talk to me during office hours, and I will pick a theme for you. Right. So one of the things I want to do today is talk about chapters 2 and 3, uh, primarily the plot, and then pick out which themes come out in here to help those of you that need to pick a theme. Let's talk about chapter 2. So in chapter 1, right, we met Rama, who is going to be our hero for the story, and we know that he is the reincarnation, or he is the god Vishnu in human form, but he doesn't know that he's a god yet, right? His dad is a king in India, and his kind of spiritual advisor has come in and taken Rama on a journey where he's learning. We get some of these stories about different people during in the kingdom. Right? In chapter 2, we enter a new town, right? Rama and the mentor have entered the town, and what happens in chapter 2? Can anybody give us the super quick version of it? You're all being shy. I know some of you read it because some of you were telling me about it last week. One of the themes in chapter 2 is love, right? Yes, it's about Sita and marriage. Basically, the story ends with Rama married to Sita. Yes. But interestingly enough, the not everything is super easy, right? In these stories, there have to be trials and tribulations. And the story begins with Rama is entering this town. Sita is in her balcony and she looks down and the two see each other. And it's like love at first sight. Not like, it is love at first sight. These people have not uttered a single word to one another, and yet they're in love, right? Does anybody remember how we see Sita in love? I'm like, this stood out to me because it's in at the very start of chapter 2, after Rama sees her. They say, the moment he vanished, her mind became uncontrollably agitated. The eye had admitted a slender shaft of love, which later expanded and spread into her whole being. She fell ill. What does that tell us, or what does that tell us about love? Oh, let me see. Gerardo saying Sita was complaining a lot and questioning about who was Rama. Yeah, she immediately is asking everybody, hey, what happened with that guy over there? Right? She can't. He is there and he meets her dad, who's the king, but there's still no interaction between them, right? And yet, when Rama is sitting down with her father, the king, it becomes clear. They ask about his daughter, and the dad says, "Yeah, I've got my daughter, but there's too many people who want her. They keep coming over and fighting over her." So the dad doesn't just want to like send her away with any of these suitors. So he devises a clever plot so that he doesn't have to make a decision about who he's gonna give his daughter in marriage to, right? And it's well, you guys tell me what's the clever trick he's devised. Shiva's bow. Yeah, whoever can, um, what is it? Lift, bend, and string Shiva's bow can have his daughter's hand in marriage. And everyone, all the suitors have tried, but just by looking at it, they can tell they're not going to be able to do it. It's a very heavy bow. Yeah, as I was saying in the thing. See, so now the father, though, as he's talking to Rama and to the mentor, he's like, now it's actually too impossible of a task. I came up with this idea, and now I'm afraid I'm never going to be able to marry off my daughter. Right. So that's a bit of a worry. So Rama decides he's going to try, like, bring over the bow. let's see. Let's see what Rama can do. And of course, Rama is able to lift, bend, and string Shiva's bow. There was a moment as I was rereading that part where I was like, I knew they were going to get married because I know what happens later on in the story, but there was a moment where you think maybe some drama is going to happen because Sita asks, she is told that somebody has been able to, lift, bend, and string the bow, but she doesn't know who it is. So she's like, I hope it's that one guy I fell in love with, but she has no control over it, right? She has no control over it. It turns out everything's fine. The man that is able to fulfill the task is the man she has fallen in love with. Yes, but you can tell, right, how this story has makes for a really good, like, modern adaptation. Like, it has been adapted into a soap like retelling. There's been various movies of the story, and the story gets shifted and some of it gets modified. So there are versions of it where there's a little bit more drama in the marriage. But don't worry, more drama is coming for Rama and Sita. On the other hand, what theme do you think comes out more in chapter two? Is it the politics? Is it the environment? Is it gender roles? And on this, it's about romance. And romance is always about gender roles, right? It's always about gender roles. But how romantic do you think the story is?
I think it's like one-sided romantic, where it's like for a guy, it's like, oh yeah, that's romantic, but I can't imagine it's romantic for a girl.
Oh, that's interesting. There is a little bit more like matter of factness about it that I think maybe appeals more to a male audience. Yeah. Anybody else? How romantic do you think it is? I have to say, I kind of, I guess I'm expressing that Carlos is correct because as I read it, I was like, it's not romantic at all. She gets no choice. It's like a total accident that they end up together because they don't even say a single word to each other. They're in love, and I'm like, okay, that can make an okay story, but she has no choice. She doesn't even get to see him use the bow. She's like in a totally different part of the palace, and that feels a lot like it's just men showing off to each other. Right? It's about the role of the men, and not so much about what the women are doing or even how they're feeling. It feels like the usual romance, those generic movies about romance. That's something I can definitely see that. I can definitely see some of that. But anybody else? What were your thoughts on the romance of it all? No, nothing? Okay. Then let's talk about the next chapter because the next chapter is less about romance and more about the court, the politics of a kingdom, right? What happens in chapter three? Nothing? Am I going to have to quiz you on the book? I'm very good at coming up with questions on reading. You haven't read the third chapter? Okay. Well, I will do a quick rundown. And by the way, I've read this book a couple of different times. And one of the things that I do as I'm reading it um, is I have little note cards and I write short summaries of the just the plot and the key characters in my little note card. That for me helps for when when I'm teaching the book and I'm looking over at it again. But I recommend doing something like that because it helps when you're writing your paper. That way you don't have to go back and reread entire chunks of the book. You're just writing notes on the themes that come up, putting highlighting if you're using the PDF um, that's on the course website, that you're highlighting the parts that are standing out to you. That way you can just go in and look at what you highlighted and not have to reread large chunks. But chapter three is we're back with Rama's dad, so the king. His dad is the king, right? He wants to step down. He's tired. He's noticing that he's not able to pay as much attention. His energy level is down. Did I move it to Wednesday? Okay, so it's totally fine now that I'm like, I thought chapter three was for Wednesday. I still want to give you a rundown of the plot of chapter three going in. That way, hopefully, it'll be easier for anybody who's still struggling with the story. So the dad wants to step down. So right away, at the beginning, you're not even told at first that the Saratha is. We're talking about Rama's dad. He wants to step down, and guess who he wants to take over the as king? You could probably guess this or that, knowing he wants Rama to take over as king. Right, and he's gonna make that announcement. He's gonna tell his advisors and everybody at the court, I want Rama to take over as king. But he's worried. He's worried. He has this bad feeling. He's been dreaming about comets, and he's thinking that the stars are not lining up for a positive outcome. So he tries to rush the crowning of Rama as king. But then in this world, the kings have multiple wives. And remember that Rama's dad has multiple wives, and he had asked for sons. He had actually gotten several sons, right? So Rama's not the only son, and so we meet one of the other wives for the king, Kaeki, and her son is Baratha. Baratha is not at the kingdom yet; he's away, so things are going to be decided without him. But someone who's friends with Kaeki comes in and tells her, "You know what's going to happen, right? Rama's going to be king." And pay attention to how Kaeki reacts to the news that it's not her son that's going to be crowned, it's Rama. Right? And then what that conversation between Kaeki and Kuni is, right? There's something important there between the interaction between one of his wives and the king when it comes to which son is going to take over, right? Because this has to do about how important familial relationships are. What's more important, the relationship between a husband and wife, between a son and a father, or between two sons, right? That's where I think you can see a lot about the moral lesson of the story, right? And how families are supposed to function, and then what are the things that disrupt a harmonious family. Does that sound good? Okay, I'm like, hello, anybody awake? So, one of the things that will help you better understand what is happening in the Ramayana, I think, is for us to talk about religion again. Religion is never going to go away in our class. So let me share my screen and go back to South Asia. Right, we went to China for a little bit, but now let's look at what is happening in terms of religion. So last time we talked about India, about South Asia. We talked about the Brahmanic religion, right? Traditional religion in India, which had some basic tenets at the beginning, but then a caste system was added into religious ideas in order to keep the structure, the political and social structure that existed in India. Right? So the religion didn't have any justification for like kings. It didn't have a caste system, but it is added to the Brahmanic religion in India. Right, so that's the traditional, the kind of original religion in India. But because it's a religion that supports the status quo, new religions are developed that really end up being in opposition to the traditional religion. Right? One of those religions is Jainism. Has anyone ever heard of Jainism? I have some symbols here that might help you. Oh, someone in the chat. No, okay. So then Jainism is super interesting. It's not one of the largest religions, but it is one that is really interesting because Jainism is actually, you've seen the symbols, yeah. Jainism is popularized by Vardhamana Mahavira, or you can shorten it to Mahavira, right? And Mahavira left home at the age of 30 to seek truth. And notice how some of these stories are going to be very similar to one another. But Mahavira leaves at the age of 30 to seek truth. He spends 12 years as an ascetic, basically as somebody who renounces all like physical comfort. An ascetic, somebody who basically lives on their own, no comfort, and just basically does some sort of either prayer or meditation. Right? So he rejects all material possessions and all physical pleasures. Right? While doing that, in the process of doing that, he reaches enlightenment. Right? So then his goal after that was to teach others how to reach enlightenment, right? So the goal for Jainists, for people who practice Jainism, is to reach enlightenment. But so how do you reach enlightenment? Well, the main thing is living an aesthetic life, right? not caring about material possessions, not caring about how comfortable your body is, or accumulating any goods, right? Um, Mahavira taught that the universe obeys its own everlasting rules. Right? The universe has rules, and the rules never change. It cannot be affected by any person, and it cannot be affected by any god. Right? The reason that's important is because in Jainism, then, if the universe just has rules that work on their own and can never be changed, then you don't need gods, period. Right? What you need to do then in order to achieve enlightenment is to just understand the universe and the rules that it functions with. Right? So in Jainism, there's not that same kind of worshiping of gods because you don't need them here. Mahavira also believed that the purpose of life is to purify your soul through an aesthetic lifestyle, right? Getting rid of all material possessions. And when you get rid of all your material possessions and you don't worry about how comfortable you are, you can reach enlightenment and permanent bliss. So the way to happiness is basically to get rid of everything that holds, like, connects your body to the material world, right? So in this place, in this, for Jainism, it is not about knowledge. It is all about what you do, and renouncing material possessions. Right? The thing that makes Jainism also stand out is the doctrine of ahimsa, which is no hurt. That every single little creature on earth has a soul, and you cannot hurt anything that has a soul. Right? So it means you can't eat animals, right? You can't eat animals, but also for a lot of Jainists, they will even walk around with a mask on their face to prevent you from, like, breathing in a mosquito or little bugs that fly in our face all the time. Like, if you hurt any kind of living creature, even if it's by accident, by them just like coming into contact with you, they believe that all of that counts against you and against your ability to reach enlightenment. So it's a kind of, like, extreme belief, right? Extreme belief. And there are people that try to live that life of, like, you can't hurt plants, you can't hurt animals, no matter how small they are, because all of that hurt you're causing another souls will hurt you. What do you think? Could you do it? Could you live a Jainist life?
Yeah, I'm basically there already.
You're basically there. But
Yeah.
think about it. Like, I think about, like, they say that in our sleep, there's a certain amount of bugs we eat during our lifetime. Like, that we can't, we don't control because it happens in our sleep. That all of that you have to try to prevent.
Yeah, I'm vegetarian, so I don't eat like meat or anything like that. So halfway there.
Then you are, yeah. And they would just say that's a great start, but now don't hurt anything, right? No hurt anything. You couldn't be able to walk on, like, certain like grass and things like that, because that's also believed to have a soul. Uh, Says I don't think so. So this is, I don't think so. It is like kind of extreme, but they also, one of the things that is interesting about Jainism is that they use this symbol. You see the symbol over here, the symbol we know as the swastika, right? That it's associated with Nazis. They were using that symbol long before the Nazis in Germany, right? For them, the swastika means the perpetual nature of the universe, right? This idea that the universe doesn't change, that these rules exist and it just doesn't change. That's what the swastika means to them. And it does sometimes create some misunderstandings with Westerners that see these symbols, and immediately for us, we associate it with the Nazis. But within Jainist and some Buddhist circles, like it's not, it's a religious symbol. So like something to keep in mind when you travel. You don't want to get into trouble and accusing people of being Nazis who are not. Then we come to Buddhism. So this becomes one of the major world religions, right? Does anybody know the story of Buddhism or the Buddha? No? So one of the interesting things is that, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Confucianism. So Confucius, sorry, Mahavira, who founded Jainism, and the Buddha were all contemporaries. They all existed. They all lived at the same time, right? So these are religions that are being developed at the same time. Why do you think it's all happening in the same number of years? The same generation is when a lot of these religions get developed. Any ideas? One of the things that we can probably guess, and you'd be accurate, is that conflict, right? When there's a lot of conflict, a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainty in the world, people seek answers, right? And that search for answers often finds the creation of new beliefs, right? That's how we get some of these, and of doing something different. Yeah, right. And if you remember, Confucianism is developed during the Warring States period in China. So there's a lot of warfare, a lot of uncertainty. Well, similarly in South Asia, we were seeing a lot of conflict, a lot of people who were losing trust in the political and religious system, right? Because the religious system was changed in order to help preserve the caste system that existed. And so a lot of people are looking for a different answer than the one that is provided by that traditional Brahmanic religion. So Jainism provides an alternative to the traditional Brahmanic religion. And really, even though Jainism does not directly challenge traditional religion, because it offers a different answer, right? It is a kind of challenge to traditional religion. So okay, Buddhism is another challenge to Brahmanic thinking that comes from Siddhartha Gautama, or the Buddha, which is also means the enlightened one. So he offered an alternative to the social and political traditions, right? He was born to a small oligarchic community, right? His dad was the ruler of this community in the foothills of the Himalayas. At the age of 29, he walks away from everything, right? He walks away from his inheritance, from his path towards being the ruler. He leaves behind his wife, and he leaves behind his newborn son. And it's kind of an extreme thing, because somebody who is married, who just had a son, usually isn't thinking about leaving, right? Usually they're thinking about, building community, building a family. But for the Buddha, he really felt that he needed to go out and find enlightenment on his own, and that he couldn't do it by staying at home and following the life that had been prepared for him. So he shaved his head and beard as a symbol of him wanting to live an aesthetic life. Right? He gives up all his worldly possessions and all of his family relationships. Right? He does his goal, or the reason why he's searching for enlightenment, is that um, he thinks that most people live lives of endless suffering, and he wants to find a way out of that suffering and that pain, right? And he believes that from the minute we are born, right, that the childbirth process is a painful process. From that point on, everything that happens in our lives is about pain and suffering, right? Because from the minute we are born, we're just aging. We get older, we get sick, we experience disease, and then we die. He says he did believe in reincarnation. So you die, then you are reincarnated, and the same thing begins over again. You are born out of this painful process, and then the pain just continues. And so he believed that life had was just a cycle of pain, and he wants to find a way out of it. That's the purpose for why he's giving up everything to go find what ends up being called nirvana, right? So nirvana means enlightenment and the absence of pain. Right? That's what he is. He's looking for and what he finds. Right? Christian, your friend converted that. I'm like, so maybe you can give us a little bit of the experience in a little bit. His teachings, I'm reducing. I'm not going to go into all the complexity of Buddhism because it can be complex. But the point I want to make, or the argument I want to make, is that at their core, all of these religions that emerged during this period can be really simple. And the simplicity of these religions is what attracts people to them. You know, if you go and talk to someone about, oh yes, my religion, it has all of this, all of that, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do all these millions of things, that can turn off people. So originally, when these religions are being spread, they really have really basic ideas that attract a lot of people, right? For within Buddhism is, that there are four truths, right? Um, Four truths: that life from birth to death is full of suffering, that suffering is caused by desire. We only suffer because we want something else. Right? The only way to rise above the suffering is to not have any desire then. Right? And how to achieve that is only through the Noble Eightfold Path. Right? You need to follow the Eightfold Path in order to achieve nirvana and leave the cycle of suffering. Right? That in itself is kind of a simple idea. What is the Eightfold Path? Well, it is this: in order to reach nirvana, you have to have the right views. You have to have the right intentions, the right speech, the right actions, the right livelihood, effort, and concentration. Where are the gods here? Nowhere, right? There's no room for gods here. So it is not about belief in any kind of deity, right? This is about escaping that cycle of reincarnation and of suffering. Another key element of Buddhism, though, is that these ideas of the idea of the Eightfold Path and what you have to do, how do you achieve the right speech, the right actions, all of this was taught to people in the common language. Right? In most places in the world at this point, there was an academic language, right? To a language that really only academics and highly educated people used. And then there was the common language of the people. At this point in South Asia, it was Sanskrit. And so the fact that this Buddhism was taught not in the language of education or academia, but in the language that people spoke made a big difference, right? It also, this doesn't really, it's not a direct challenge to the caste system, right? And yet it kind of is, right? Any ideas of how this can be read as a challenge to the caste system?
Maybe because it's all about the individual, or rather than like I guess like a hierarchy.
Yeah, like anybody can achieve nirvana, right? If you do all the right things, you can achieve it. It doesn't matter what caste you're in, right? And Gerardo, and it's simple. Yeah, it's really simple. Anybody can do it. And so that did present a challenge to the caste system because within a caste system, the idea was like you're not all equal, right? But you, for Buddhists, the idea is you can all achieve nirvana regardless of what caste you belong to, right? And that's how it presents a challenge, right? Um, it is though also about you have to give up a lot, right? You're supposed to give up self-indulgence, right, and self-denial. The thing that I missed telling you is that it was actually not Buddha did not achieve nirvana through the aesthetic lifestyle. What he found is when he gave up all the worldly possessions and all relationships and everything, it wasn't working. It wasn't working, right? For 6 years he tried and it didn't work. And then finally, he remembered something that happened in his childhood, and that made him realize that you didn't need to punish your body in order to achieve happiness, right? That it's not about denial, but about your state of mind. There's another thing that would have been appealing to a lot of people. It still is appealing to a lot of people, right? You don't have to give up everything you have, all your worldly possessions, in order to achieve nirvana. It's all about what's in your head, not about the things you do. Well, you have to have the right actions in there too. So it's an element of it, but you don't need to, you know, kind of live a more extreme aesthetic lifestyle in order to achieve nirvana, right? Which for anybody, I mean, the whole giving up all your worldly possessions and all and everything, for a lot of people is too much to ask for. And so Buddhism provides more of a middle ground for a lot of people that think giving everything up is too extreme, right? So what what are some of you all's experience with Buddhism? Like Christian, you said your friend converted. Did that expose you a little bit more to Buddhism?
Yeah, it kind of did. Like I think it's interesting. I don't think like I haven't got into it like really, but he's talked about it and he seems really at peace with it. Because he well the way he sees it, it's like it's about me. It's not really about worshiping anything. It's more about like I guess coming at like to peace with myself
Mhm.
and finally like I guess like you said like achieving nirvana. Like he sees it as something like just finding himself.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's part of the appeal for a lot of people. There's a reason why this is a major global religion. I think there is that simplicity and that ability of like you can control it, right? There are things that you can control here and things to do to achieve that, and it doesn't rely on believing in any god, right? I think that's a major part of the appeal for it, especially I mean I would say especially at the beginning. So I'm gonna skip this video, but if anybody's interested in a little bit more of the story of the Buddha, this TED Ed video does a really good job of summarizing it all. How did it spread though? Because initially Buddhism is just a small regional religion, and at the time there were actually hundreds of other religions, right? Other explanations for how the world worked and how to achieve this kind of enlightenment, right? Well, for Buddhism, and we will see for a lot of other religions that end up becoming big, it's the king becoming a Buddhist. You have the Mauryan Empire, and King Ashoka is a Buddhist. Why does it matter when a political leader adopts a religion?
Because they set trends.
Yes, because all of a sudden, hey, what if I want to ask the king for something, right? Maybe if I convert to his religion, he's more likely to help me out, right? Gerardo, or yes, or you can put it as because the king is the one who controls people, right? He also sets the tone, right? A lot of people look to the king for how to behave, right? So it can also just make people aware of the religion, right? Some people would have never heard of Buddhism or maybe heard about it from distant relatives or distant people that live on the other side of town. But now our king is Buddhist. Let me look into that, right? What is all this Buddhism about? Right. So that's what those are some of the ways in which a king adopting a particular religion can really matter. We will see that again with Christianity, by the way. It's the same concept of when someone powerful adopts a religion, it gives it a lot of political and military force, right? Mm-hmm. This is how we get Holy Roman emperors. Mm. So, uh, so King Ashoka, through his armies, right, through conquering more land and carrying with it Buddhist principles, spreads Buddhism, right? Some of that, by the way, some of that spreading of Buddhism is made possible by the routes created by Alexander the Great and his armies. Right? A lot of the roads taken by King Ashoka's armies were laid out by Alexander first. Right? So actually, Alexander in the roads created by armies make a big difference. They're utilized here by Ashoka to grow his territory, and then as a consequence of that, you're also spreading Buddhism, right? And so uh, he also, King Ashoka, claimed that everything he was conquering was a religious conquest, right? And as he was conquering new territory, and all of the new territory he was conquering, he was building monuments, making burial sites or relics of the Buddha. And so that's another way that he is spreading Buddhism, you know, very directly. He also claimed that his goal was to rule according to the concept of Dharma. Right? And the concept of Dharma is about tolerance of others, obedience to the natural order of things, right? And respect for all of Earth's life forms. So that appealed to a lot of people, especially if they were being ruled in a harsher way before King Ashoka. In comes King Ashoka, and although there's a lot of destruction and war, he's also promising that he's going to rule with respect to all humans and living things, right? Because Dharma applied to everyone, regardless of caste. Right? Now, we know by how big Buddhism is today that it's going to be adopted by a large number of people, that this process of spreading Buddhism will be very effective. But there's always people who are reluctant to change religions, right? Especially once Buddhism reaches places like China, where there's already other ideas there, right? Confucianism had already taken hold in China. And so the introduction of Buddhism is weird at first. Like, why am I going to change to Buddhism? And yet, Buddhism is practiced in a lot of places in China and all over the continent. So, what do you think will make the difference for Buddhism? What helps the religion spread, even when there are already other ideas in existence? Any thoughts? All right, I'll give you the answer. Oh, so this is the empire, Ashoka's empire. This is what he rules. So he rules most of South Asia, right? It's not just modern day India. This is a significant empire, right? Based on the religion being interesting to compare. Yeah, so one of it is the comparison. But so in places where there were already other beliefs, it was much harder to adopt Buddhism as it was. What ends up happening, though, is that different parts of the world end up transforming Buddhism to fit already traditional beliefs, right? So one of the biggest kinds of transformations of Buddhism is Mahayana Buddhism. For Mahayana Buddhists, Buddha is a god. for most Buddha or for other Buddhists that are not Mahayana Buddhists, um, the Buddha is not a god, right? He's just somebody who has achieved enlightenment. But for Mahayana Buddhists, he is a god, right? That was a way in which they could fit the ideas of Buddhism into the way they viewed the world functioning, right? What this tells us, in addition, is that Buddhism was a very accommodating religion. It can be adapted, it can be transformed to fit local ideas. That ends up being a key way that helps religions that end up becoming world religions do that, right? If your religion can't be adapted, if it can't be changed, then why would people convert? You're not giving them a good reason to convert. And so one of the biggest kind of sects within Buddhism is Mahayana. They also create this position before you reach enlightenment, right? If you're not an enlightened person, there's a secondary level that you achieve, which is of being a bodhisattva. Right? These are people who could have achieved enlightenment. They've done everything required to achieve enlightenment, but they have delayed fully achieving nirvana in order to help everybody else, right? So that these are people that know the path you need to take, but they've delayed their achievement of it in order to help everyone else, right? So it's a kind of like spiritual halfway point. You haven't achieved enlightenment, but you could, right? Hopefully for those of you that know a little bit of the history of like other religions, like that's a main one of the main things that helps Catholicism spread is that it can be modified to fit local traditional ideas, right? For example, because I know a lot of you are familiar with Catholicism, the idea of the saints in Catholicism, right? And the fact that, okay, whatever the local god was of a region can just be made into a saint within Catholicism, helps make Catholicism appealing in a lot of different places. So it's a similar concept then with Buddhism, that it can be adapted to fit other ideas that already exist in other places. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like if it doesn't, you want to tell me. Um, all right, one more religion. As I said, I'm not going deep into all of these religions. It's kind of just we need to understand what the beliefs are and what makes them so popular, right? Another religion that gets developed after Buddhism, so this isn't at the same time, this comes after, is Hinduism. And it will also become very popular, right? Part of the popularity within Hinduism is a kind of simplicity as well. Again, at its core, it can be very simple. They believe in many gods, right? Multiple gods. But Hinduism is in a lot of ways a kind of precursor to monotheism, or closely related to monotheism, because although there are many gods, for some Hindus, they are all the manifestation of a single god. So really it's all of the gods are just different aspects of one god, but multiple. Does that sound weird? I'm like, maybe not. If you're Catholic, it's the same idea of like the Trinity, right? Like God, but you have God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, which is contradictory, but it makes sense within the religion, right? Um, so what ends up happening for Hindus is that you can basically choose a god that you like the most. So a lot of families worship particular gods, right? And everybody can worship a totally different one, and they're still practicing Hinduism. Because in the end, everybody is still worshiping the same one, the same God. Right? For Hindus, they believe in reincarnation, right? And they also believe that your actions in one life will affect, the reincarnation process. That the idea of karma. I think our understanding of karma ends up being oversimplified, but it's the idea that your actions, whatever they are, have a particular kind of energy. You're putting that energy out into the world, and that energy will come back to you. But again, because they believe in a cycle of reincarnation, for Hindus, the goal is to achieve liberation and release from that endless cycle of birth and death. Right? So the goal is to end all the reincarnation. So how do you achieve that? Well, you detach yourself from the feelings and perceptions that tie you to the world. So this does require a level of aestheticism. You also have to achieve a realization about how everything is connected, right? The unity of the soul and the unity of the universal. But within Buddhism, there's not just one way of achieving that goal of breaking the cycle of reincarnation. You can do it multiple ways, right? You can do it by studying. You can study your way out of reincarnation. You can also live an aesthetic life, renounce all worldly possessions, and so through those actions, achieve escape from reincarnation. Or you can also achieve escape from reincarnation by your devotion to a god, right? So by religious belief, right? So tell me, what do you think people will find appealing about Hinduism?
Hinduism to me is like you pretty much dictate what you want to believe in, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's very flexible. And so for a lot of people, it's, hey, I'm going to go with that because there's not a one way of achieving that enlightenment, right? There's not one way out of the cycles of reincarnation. There's multiple ways. And so you can kind of fit it or mold it to fit your needs. It's very flexible in that way. Right. Yeah, I think that's, and the universality of it. Yeah, that absolutely. Here's the thing about Hinduism. Within Hindu beliefs at its inception, right, the caste system is important to it, right? Because the belief is that whatever you did in your past life, you are now, basically living the repercussions of it, right? If you lived a terrible life in the past, you were reincarnated in a lower caste in your current life. So if you are an untouchable, right? If you are at the lowest of the low of the caste system, it is because you did something in your past life to earn it. So how to achieve Dharma, or how do you observe Dharma within this system, is you behave according to your caste. So a way to live a good Hindu life is to accept your role within society and to behave accordingly.
Sorry, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Like going by that kind of law, you know, the universe or whatever, would then people that follow that religion, like if there's like, I don't know a PC way to say this, but like, you know, people that are like transients or, you know, whatever, do they see them as, oh, in their past life they were terrible, and so they've been reincarnated, like when they are coming back, you know, again, this is their punishment. Or like, and then it just kind of perpetuates, like, so could it be seen as something to be really hard to get out of? Because then statistically speaking, they
They're
like,
more likely to then continue doing bad things.
yes,
Yes.
yes. So like, how do you get out of that?
Okay, so that's actually a great question. How do you get out of that? Is you behave properly in this current life. So that means you don't try to work your way out of your current social status. You can still believe in God. You can still, do the right actions, but the right actions are staying within your caste. You don't try to get into politics. You don't try to make more money. You don't try to do other things. And if you stay within the appropriate actions of your class, then in the next reincarnation, you might move up.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. But so this for Hinduism then is not at all a challenge to traditional Brahmanic ideas. Right? It is
So
not.
then people that are like at the top of the top, do you think they're viewed upon as like, oh man, they've really done well and like in all their past lives?
Yes. Yes. They can screw it up though if they don't behave well in the current life. They will go down in the next life, right? They will lose status in the next one. So they still have to be benevolent. They still have to behave in a proper way, even though they are in a higher caste. But they now, because they're in a higher caste, they have earned the right for more wealth, for more flexibility, for just more.
Okay.
That's my understanding of it. Yeah. So, but then that reinforces then that like everybody needs to stay within the confines of how they were born, right? There's no room for movement there. In fact, it's against the religion to try to move out of your caste, right? Because the only way, I'm sorry, let me share my screen again. The only way to get out of your caste is to behave accordingly now. And then in the future, in a future life, you can hope to move up and be born into a higher caste. I'm going to skip some of this, but you will see in the Ramayana a lot of reflections of Hinduism. It is a very Hindu text. As it was adapted later on, right, in all the different versions of the Ramayana that come after those original stories, it gets adapted. So there's like a Buddhist version of the Ramayana and all of that. But it is originally a very Hindu text. And so that's one of the things that you can choose to analyze, the ways in which Hinduism is reflected in the Ramayana. I think you will see a lot of that in chapter 3 is where you see a lot of like, you have to behave in a particular way. Right? You'll see it, one of the larger gods. There's a few major gods within Hinduism, even though there's a lot of different ones. But Shiva is one of the kind of main gods. Shiva is the destroyer and the creator of good and evil. And this is a very common way in which you see Shiva represented. So you would see like the multiple hands, the scepter here, and just some of these are just typical ways of representing Shiva. Then you have Krishna and Radha. So Krishna is actually an avatar or a human manifestation of Vishnu, which is basically what Rama in the story of the Ramayana is, right? A human manifestation of Vishnu. So Vishnu has different ways in which that God is represented. So you'll see multiple versions of what they may look like. But Vishnu is the supreme being, right? And typically, when you see Vishnu or Krishna, you see them with Radha. You see this kind of partnership, right? And Radha is only shown with Krishna, right? So Radha, for many, symbolizes the individual surrender to the love of God, because that is a romantic relationship. Right? I'm going to skip this. There are sacred texts. I'm going to skip all the stuff, but basically the religious text within Hinduism build on the original Brahmanic texts. Right? The original traditional South Asian Brahmanic texts get built on in order to create the Vedas, the sacred knowledge for Hindus. I do want to play a short video because so we can see how Hinduism is practiced today, because it has changed over time, right? Oh, let me cancel that actually. It has changed over time. Let me ignore that. And I already had it queued up in a different one. I'm sorry, you were seeing what I was Googling before class. So this is from the Khan Academy. So I think a lot of you are familiar with it because their videos are shown in a lot of classes. Can you all see? Hopefully?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now let me see if you can all hear. Can you all hear that?
Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I will, we won't watch all of it. It's 30 minutes, but we'll watch a few of it just so we can see how Hinduism is practiced today. And you'll see how some of it's the same and then some of it has changed.
India is a land of incredible diversity, history, and culture. Throughout the centuries, numerous religious traditions have coexisted. In this program, we'll explore two of the great religious traditions of India, Hinduism and Buddhism. We'll see how Hindu and Buddhist beliefs are practiced and made visible through architecture, sculpture, and painting.
Hinduism may be described as a museum of religions because you have every conceivable perspective. You may be a follower of yoga and you may be a Hindu. You may believe in a personal God or you may believe in an impersonal absolute. There's a wide variety of choices, you know.
What we are confronted by in India is variety of images representing numerous deities, and they are all the gods in one way or another come from the same entity or idea, which is sometimes called Brahman, sometimes it's called the reality, sometimes called truth, but these are just different manifestations.
You know, there is this concept that we tend to categorize that religion must have only one deity, but this concept of many in one is something that the Hindu accepts right from the beginning.
The different forms of Hindu gods arise to meet different needs, and it comes out of Hindu mythology as well, where you'll see gods emerging in different forms to defeat certain demons. The most frequently represented deities that you'll find are probably the great gods of Hinduism, and these are Shiva and Vishnu, and the goddess will be represented in various forms.
The way to recognize many of these deities is via their attributes, and very often the Hindu deities are represented with multiple arms and multiple heads, and they primarily represent the aspect of the divine majesty of the gods and their superhuman qualities.
The god Shiva can take many forms. He can appear as a ferocious figure, or he can also be depicted as a family man. While Shiva has dreadlocks, and often he's shown with a third eye on his forehead, and he often carries the trident.
He's always shown his body smeared with ashes and his hair are unkempt and disheveled and wearing a garland of cobras.
He is represented as the great yogi and the great teacher. Shiva may be represented in his symbolic forms, such as the linga or the phallus. The linga represents the creative power. You would recognize that a temple is dedicated to Shiva by the image of the linga that you would see in the temple sanctuary.
And here we have got a very interesting object called Tripura Antaka. That means the victory over the three cities. And the Shiva is shown here as an archer in his victorious pose. The legend tells us that by performing severe austerities, three demon brothers received a gift of powers so that they can build three indestructible cities, one of gold in the heavens, one of silver in the sky, and one of iron in the earth. Thinking themselves invincible, they ravaged both God and man. But there was a stipulation that once in 1,000 years, the three cities would join to become one, and then it would be possible to destroy them if pierced by a single arrow. So the man and God petitioned Shiva, and when the three cities became united, he discharged his mighty arrow and destroyed the cities, thus rescuing the world from the evil tyranny.
Okay, I'm going to stop it here, but it's linked on Canvas so that if anybody wants to keep looking at it, because some of it is very interesting, and you see a lot of it actually coming up in the Ramayana. So now that you know a little bit more about Hinduism, can you see some of the connections a little bit more?
Yes.
Right, like all this idea about demons and gods and like all the stories that Rama, the like adventures that he's going on, the stories he's hearing all fit perfectly within Hindu beliefs. Yeah, and so if that's something that interests you, it's something that you can write about for your paper. But again, other themes that I think stand out and that are possible to write about is also gender norms, politics, morality, the environment. So right now you don't need a thesis necessarily, but I want you to be picking out the theme that you want to write about for that. So I will stop recording.